This is part 71 of my series on my N-gauge model railway project. Previous parts cover the project from its inception through the creation of the baseboard, selection and laying of track, building of scenic items, obtaining rolling stock, etc. The project is ongoing. This part deals with my experiences with Dapol locomotives. I'm afraid this video will run a little long as I want to try to bring all of my experience with Dapol engines together. I have now acquired 6 Dapol locomotives, or perhaps I should say 5.5, but you'll see what I mean by that as we go along. Of the Dapol locomotives that I have, 3 are tender engines and 3 are tank engines, and I have, well, very mixed feelings about them. In compressed summary, these are all very nice looking detailed models, but I cannot say I'm entirely satisfied with how they run. On my system at least, which is entirely Kato track, Kato controllers, Kato sound boxes. I find that on my system the Dapol locos just don't seem to run smoothly. They tend to run in a sort of hesitant, jerky manner, constantly showing abrupt changes of speed, which makes their progress look unrealistic, since real trains have a lot of momentum and simply don't stutter and jerk as they move along. And this is after substantial running and in some cases months of operation. The tank engines are a bit better than the tender engines in respect of smooth running, but then the Dapol tank engines have their own additional problems. Being light models with short wheelbases and no traction tyres, the tank engines are not at all good pullers, and can only handle on my layout very small, light trains. The Dapol tender engines, on the other hand, do have traction tyres and are also larger, so they in fact pull very well, being quite capable of taking substantial trains up a gradient, even though they draw their trains along rather jerkily. So much for summary. Now let's have a detailed look at the 6 Dapol locomotives that I have, and then we'll see some running video of each of them. I'm going to go through the Dapol locos that I have in the order that I acquired them. One more thing I should mention up front is that I would probably have acquired more Dapol models sooner were it not for the fact that Dapol seemed to have some sort of total aversion to the London, Midland and the Scottish Railway, which is the primary company that I model since my family used to work for this company. I started out in N-gauge specifically modelling the LMS and only branched out into the operations of the others of the Big Four subsequently, one at a time. And whilst Dapol model locomotives and coaches of the LNER, the GWR and the Southern Railway, they do not model anything whatsoever of the LMS. I especially regret this with respect to coaches, as I really like the Dapol coach models that I have, and if Dapol did make LMS coaches I would certainly buy them. But back to locomotives. As I say, I only acquired Dapol models as I branched out into operations of Big Four companies beyond the LMS. And the first other company I represented was the LNER, since they were the only other one of the Big Four that had lines through Leicester, where I grew up. In fact, the next LNER, and before that ex-Great Northern Line, went right under the end of the road by my childhood home. So this was the first Dapol loco that I acquired, a balanced Empire of India, one of the LNER's record-breaking A4 Express passenger class. I chose the Empire of India out of this class as my family is partly Indian, so that's another association. I bought this engine new, so I ran it in thoroughly. I didn't have any LNER coaches at this point, so the first thing I hooked the Empire of India up to was an LMS inspection saloon which had arrived in the post around the same time. However, when I ordered the Empire of India, I also ordered a rake of 5 Dapol LNER Gresley teak coaches, and those came shortly after the engine. And here is the engine on my layout, as it was at that point hooked up to 3 of those teak coaches. Since the A4 seemed quite capable of pulling 3 of the coaches, I went ahead and hooked it up to all 5. I'm pleased to say that with its traction tyres it was quite capable of pulling this train up the steepest gradient on my layout. Unfortunately, I was already noticing that whilst the A4 pulled the train without stalling or getting stuck, it didn't really pull it smoothly. There was an awkward stuttering about the way it progressed, and I'm afraid this proved a theme for me with Dapol locos. The next Dapol loco I bought came as I branched out into the Great Western. I picked up a bunch of Great Western coaches at reasonable prices used from a local store, Tiny Railroads in Delhi, Ontario. So I figured I'd better get a GWR passenger loco to pull them. And after looking around at what I could find on sale, I decided to go with the Dapol Hall class, specifically Sketty Hall, basically because I preferred the version of the GWR livery this one came in. Mechanically, this was very similar to the A4. These locos are driven by the engine's wheels, but their motor is in the tender. The motor drives the loco wheels via a drive shaft connecting tender to loco. Both models are also fitted with traction tyres and do come with spare traction tyres. The drive shaft arrangement has the unfortunate downside that a fairly substantial shaft has to go between the tender and the loco. This compromises the modelling, since obviously it means that the lower parts of the cab and the front of the tender can't be modelled properly, and the shaft itself, though black, can be seen from some angles. Apart from the issue of the drive shaft, these models are finished to quite a high level of detail, with separately fitted handrails, etc., well-finished wheels, no bare axles showing, very nicely painted liveries and good surface detail rivets, etc. A generally handsome appearance, some cab detail also, and nicely done name and number plates. Here's the Sketty Hall pulling a train of 5 GWR mainline coaches up the gradient to the viaduct. These are Graham Farish coaches rather than Dapol, as that was what I found locally. I also got some Lima GWR coaches locally. This point on the layout can also be tricky for locos, since a longer train is being pulled through a double curve which creates resistance and can also threaten derailing. The Sketty Hall with this GWR train handled this without problems. However, I'm afraid I'd have to say that the Sketty Hall was even more jerky in running than the Empire of India, which caused me to start to have some serious concerns about Dapol locomotives. Definitely good looking, but the lack of smoothness in running really compromises realism. I just wish such a handsome model would run more evenly. It can certainly pull a train, however. Here it is pulling 6 Lima GWR coaches up the gradient and having no problem getting them up. Clearly Lima's conception of GWR coach colours differs from Graham Farish's. Despite my concern about the smoothness of running, I went ahead and bought another Dapol tender loco, and this one was the strangest story of all. Not presumably entirely Dapol's fault, but it's hard to tell, and I'll leave you to judge. I was now branching out into southern railway operations, having also picked up some southern coaches from tiny railroads. I didn't find very much in the way of southern passenger locos on sale at the time, and I ended up going for the Dapol model of the Schools class, specifically Malvern in southern malachite green livery. I bought this on eBay UK. I'm in Canada, and since I'm modelling pre-nationalisation operations in British Engage, I have to buy almost all of my rolling stock from the UK, mainly online. This model was offered for sale as a new item and at a commensurate price. However, when I unpacked it very carefully, as I had heard that these models were fragile, and put it on the track to run it in, I couldn't get it to run at all. Well, the motor ran, but I couldn't get the loco around any curve at all. As soon as it started to go around a curve, it either derailed or jammed and stalled. I inspected it, and the problem seemed to be that the rear wheels of the front bogie were fouling the moving valve gear as the bogie turned. This seemed to be a rather basic problem. I put the loco back on the tracks, but this time on my outer line, which has the largest radius curves, 348mm radius, 13.75 inches. What Cato designate as outside curves. However, as the loco tried to go round the first of these larger radius curves, it broke itself. One end of one of the main connecting rods came right off, presumably because of impact between the moving valve gear and the turning rear bogie wheels. At this point, the story got, I felt at least, even stranger. I contacted the eBay vendor from whom I had purchased the loco and explained what had happened. He didn't seem particularly surprised and immediately proposed to refund all of my money without requiring me to return the broken loco. Well, obviously I certainly couldn't complain about this, but the whole thing did strike me as quite odd. The vendor did add the information that this was the only example of this model he had acquired, and that he had tried to fit it with DCC and concluded it was not suitable. So how much of this model's troubles could be laid to Dapol's manufacture of it, and how much to the vendor's handling, I really can't say. although there was no obvious sign that the cylinders or valve work had been bent out of position, for example, and I have since seen other examples of this model being sold with similar damage, e.g. missing the main connecting rods entirely, which leads me to conclude that my experience is not just an isolated incident. We'll return to have a bit more of a look at this model later, but at this point I just accepted it as a loss and put it aside. But I did decide to give Dapol another chance with the Southern Locan, this time a tank engine, an 044 M7 class, again in malachite green. This was my first Dapol tank engine, a very nice looking model. The bright green livery is very striking, and the livery lining and lettering seem to be perfectly applied. The model is again quite detailed with separately fitted handrails, etc. Perhaps just a notch below the Hall class in level of detail. There's not much in the cab, and the wheel set doesn't look quite as good as on the Hall. Still, overall, I'm very happy with the look of this model. Unfortunately, it's not much of a puller. Being lightweight and having only 2 pairs of driving wheels and no traction tyres, it just doesn't have much hold on the rails and can't really get anything much up any kind of gradient. Which is why I've got it running around on my outer circuit, which is my flattest line, and even here it struggled somewhat and could only manage 3 coaches. On the inner line, with marked gradients, the M7 really couldn't get aground. So it looked nice, but it was rather hard to use a lot. I acquired a Graham Farish general-purpose tank engine in Southern livery and used that to double head with the Dapol M7. This way I was able to get a substantial Southern goods train round my inner lines, though the engines made rather an odd pair. Here we're back looking at the Schools class. You can see here how, as the bogie turns, the edges of the back wheels are going to push against the valve gear. And of course, as the driving wheels turn, that connection between the connecting rod and the valve gear is constantly going to be moving rapidly backwards and forth. And so it will strike the back bogie wheels as seen here, which will either result in the bogie wheels being pushed off the tracks or in the valve gear jamming the mechanism of the loco. I really couldn't see how this could be avoided. If the cylinders were mounted further out, that would do it, but they seemed very firmly fixed in place and there was no sign that they had been bent. If I wanted to try to run this loco at all, my options seemed to be 1. To somehow bend the cylinders and valve gear outward, or 2. To remove part of the valve gear, or 3. To remove the back wheels of the bogie. Option 3 seemed to be the least risky and destructive, since it could readily be undone, so I went ahead and removed the rear axle from the bogie. This did allow the loco to get round curves finally, so I was able to run it in. However, even now it could get around the layout, it still ran very poorly, being jerky and hesitant to a degree well beyond anything else I had seen before. I went back to the A4 at this point and experimented with it a bit further. Specifically, all of these Dapol models come with NEM couplings, and whilst supplied with Rapido couplings fitted, they also include Dapol's own style of knuckle couplings as an alternative. Here you can see a Dapol knuckle coupling fitted into the NEM pocket of the A4 tender. Here are the contents of the detail pack for the A4. There's an extra drive shaft and cab doors for display, and both long and short Dapol knuckle couplings are provided. All of the Dapol coaches also came with these alternate knuckle couplings, so I fitted the whole NNER passenger train up with knuckle couplings. I went for the short couplings, which made the coaches join very nicely, and they were still able to get round all of my curves, though on the minus side they were a devil to get coupled together with the short knuckle couplings. No way they'd couple automatically, and even getting them to couple manually took considerable fiddling. Here's the next Dapol item I picked up, another tank loco, a 1400 class in a set with a GWR auto coach. As you can see here, this was bought from Rails of Sheffield, used with some declared minor damage. The minor damage is not very surprising. Those separately fitted Dapol handrails are very delicate, and if you try to pick the loco up with your fingers on them, you will break them. I got the loco onto the bench and did my best to repair the broken handrails. It was certainly fiddly. I did my best to join the broken rails up using poly cement. And then I got the loco and its auto coach onto the rails. It's pretty nice looking, though unfortunately you see mechanism rather than cab detail through the cab windows. Still, it makes a handsome looking set. Very characteristically Great Western. The downside is that, again, the Loco has only 2 pairs of driving wheels with no traction tyres and very little weight, so it struggles to get even this single auto coach up any kind of gradient. And here's the final Dapol Loco I bought, another tank engine, a Stroudley Terrier in Great Western livery. This may be my favourite amongst my Dapol Locos. There's something appealing about such a small Loco modelled in such detail. And here's the Terrier on the rails. A good-looking little model. I should probably remove the front coupling when not using it, as it looks terribly clunky on such a small model. Although this is a tiny Loco, it seems to pull better than my other 2 Dapol tank engines, perhaps because it has 3 pairs of driving wheels and the weight sits entirely on those. It does not have traction tyres, but it can get a little train up my gradients. More so than the larger M7 can. So now let's have a look at some running video of all of these Locos, which will hopefully illustrate some of what I have been saying. Okay, now I just want to shoot some running footage of these Dapol locomotives, and I'm using the wider view rather than close-ups on the board because I'm more interested in showing overall how they run than showing pretty close-ups of them. So this is the Valence Sea Eagle with a bunch of LNER teak coaches and 1 Graham Farish teak coach on the back. Now, famous last words, I was about to say that this probably is the best running of the 3 tender locomotives I'm trying to run, but it's decided it wants to stop there. I guess I didn't give it quite enough speed going up the hill there, and then it... None of these Dapol locomotives basically run very smoothly on my layout, quite honestly. They tend at best to run rather jerkily. See how you can see how it's jerking there? It goes fast for a bit and then slows down. That's not me. I'm not jerking the power level up and down. That's just how the locomotive runs. It goes fast a bit, slower, fast a bit, slower a bit. That's just what they tend to do. And more noticeably so if you try and run them slower. But even if you run them fairly fast, they do that. And this is the smoothest running of them. And make sure we give it enough power to get up the hill. Now, it can get up the hill with a 6-coach train because it has traction tyres. I don't know why they have a tendency. See how it's doing it now, going downhill. It goes fast a bit, slower, fast a bit, slower a bit. And I really don't know why. I really don't. I sort of suspected it was something to do with the mechanism where the motor in the tender drives the engine via a drive shaft, and that would explain it for the tender engine. Well, could explain it for the tender engines, except that... oh, no, now we lost a coupling. Except that the tank engines that don't have that system still tend to do it as well. Let's see if we can... I don't want to get this stuck on the rails if I can possibly avoid it. These are coupled together using Dapol couplings, which are very nice, but a devil to couple up. I don't know, it's not easy at all to couple up these Dapol. Oh, now the engines come uncoupled as well. I don't think I'm going to be able to get that coupled up again. extended break there while I tried to recouple the train. Those Dapol knuckle couplings are nice in a way, but they're a devil to couple up, especially the close coupling ones. So I had to really pull the train round onto a straight piece of track, and even then it's very fiddly to do. Okay, so let's put him in there, and let's switch over to the Sketty Hall with Graham Farish coaches, Great Western. This is running, if anything, even, well, I think it is running more jerkily than the... I am not jerking the controller around. I'm trying to run it smoothly. We'll give it a bit more power here so it can get up the incline. Famous last words. Well, it got up the incline, but it didn't stay coupled. I might point out that they don't run smoothly light engine either. The jerkiness of the running has got nothing to do with them having coaches behind them. They run jerkily when you run them light engine as well. They run, and they get because they've got traction tires. All of these anyway, they can pull a substantial train up the incline, but they just don't seem to run at an even speed, creating a realistic train appearance to me. See, look how that's hesitating. It's like running in a series of little jerks and hesitations. Maybe this is something to do with the fact that the motors are not very compatible with the Kato controllers I'm using. I don't know, I'm using Kato controllers with Kato sound boxes, so, you know, my electrical system is purely Kato. Works fine with Union Mills engines, works fine with Graham Farish engines, but these Dapol engines, they run. Oh, he's lost his coupling yet again. Obviously, he's also not coupling very well to these Graham Farish Great Western coaches. He seems coupled up enough when he's on the flat, but he tends to lose him as he goes round the curve up the incline. Yeah, see, he keeps losing him there. One more try, and if I can... Oh, now I've derailed the coach, clearly. I went into that coach too fast. I went into that coach too fast and derailed it. I think that's back okay. I think that's railed okay again. Try one more time with him. No, he didn't even get as far as before this time. The heck with it. I don't know what to try, really, I don't. These are just rapido. Oh, no. It's getting less far each time, isn't he? He's getting less far each time. I don't know. He's just not coupling to that coach. Nope. Just take him round light engine. Now look how he's hesitating even light engine. And is it a problem with pickups? Is it a problem with control? What is it? I don't know. See how he seems to progress in a series of little hesitations rather than progressing evenly. Can we... I don't know whether he's going to be able to pull these coaches out the way backwards. I mean, he gets round, but it just doesn't, because of the lack of smoothness in the running, it just does not look realistic to me. Okay, now this one on the outer track, of course, is the one we had massive problems with. I mean, it just didn't work at all, really, and it's now running with its back bogey wheels taken off, but it doesn't really run now. But then again, I can't complain in a sense, since ultimately I didn't pay for this locomotive. My money was refunded because it basically wouldn't go round corners and fell apart when I got it. And I've done what I can to repair it, but it's not got the problem going around corners now. This is the schools, Malvern. It's not got the problem going round corners because I've removed the back wheels of the bogey, so now the bogey can turn and go around corners. But it exhibits this problem of jerkiness in running to the nth degree, as you can see. And now he's lost his... but now he's running light engine, and I mean, even still, he sort of goes, but that's the best I can do. Now he's got stuck there. Now he's not going at all. But that's about the best I can get out of him, is this sort of jerky attempt at running. Well, he's not going to, I know he's not going to couple up on the corner there. These are the, oh, it's actually derailed the coach there. We derailed the front coach as we went round there. These are the Dapol coaches, which are extremely nice, but also extremely sort of kind of delicate and a bit temperamental. And of course, running with such a jerky engine is obviously not going to help. They've got rapidos between them, but I've got famous last words now. Oh, it's short-circuited. Oh, that's another thing. They will, when they derail these coaches, they will short-circuit because they've got pickups in them for lighting, they will actually short-circuit the rails when they derail. Coaches don't normally do that, of course, because they don't have power connections, but these do. But look how jerkily that runs. But there and again, as I say, who knows what the history of this engine is? I don't know. I bought it initially supposedly as new, but then when it didn't work at all, I complained to the vendor, eBay vendor I bought it of, and he refunded all my money. So I can't really complain, but I don't understand why it is running in this extremely jerky fashion. I don't understand what's causing that. And we'll have a look after this at some Dapol tank engines, which are not as bad as this, but which also don't run very smoothly by my standards. Anyway, there you go. That's enough of that for now, I think. I'm going to I'll put these trains away and I'll get the tank engines out and we'll have a look at those. Okay, now let's have a look at some running with the 3 Dapol tank engines I have. First up here is the Little Terrier, which is probably my favourite of the 3. It's a lovely little engine, tiny little engine, very detailed, and ironically, so though it's the tiniest, it's actually the best puller of the 3. These have their advantages and disadvantages over the... it's very short though, so that's one problem. If there's a bit of dirty patch on the track, it's, you know, naturally its pickups are all very close together. So if there's a dirty patch on the track, it has trouble getting over it or whatever. but it can pull a little train up the incline. The tank engines probably do tend to be slightly smoother runners than the tender engines that I have. Just watching, you see they don't have the same, unless they hit a dirty patch on the track, although they don't really have the same jerkiness, so maybe the jerkiness of the engines is to do with that drive shaft system. The tank engines don't seem to have the same degree of jerkiness. They don't have much weight and whatever, but well, he's jerking there, but that's because there's a dirty patch in the track there just by the signal there. And he's wheel spinning a tiny bit, but he gets up there okay. Now, none of these tank engines have traction tyres, unlike the tender engines, which all have traction tyres. I wondered if this little terrier did have traction tyres, because he seemed to pull so well, but he doesn't. I think it's just, you know, he pulls fairly well because his weight is concentrated over the wheels. He's got 6 driving wheels, and his weight is concentrated over them. Okay, so now this is the M7, which is a bigger tank engine, a 440, but ironically, actually it's not a 440 technically, it's a 044, I guess. I really have got to rush this to get it up the hill. Barely got it up. And that's a very easy train to pull, that train. Those four-wheel coaches, southern four-wheel coaches there, they're very free-running coaches, so it's an extremely easy train to pull. They're not resistant at all, they have very free-turning wheels. It's just the slight weight of them he has trouble pulling up the hill there. So, he's a nice-looking engine, and he runs more smoothly than the tender engines, I guess, though again his pickups are rather concentrated, but he doesn't have much pulling power at all. He only has 4 driving wheels. Now I'm going to have to give him an unnatural amount of speed here coming into the incline, else he won't get up it. If I give him you've got to rush it, you've got to give him some momentum as he comes into the incline. Again, he's in the southern malachite green. He's a very handsome engine, very nice looking, but he doesn't get as much outing as he might because he's not much of a puller at all. Even the lightest train he can barely get round my inner lines with the inclines. One more time, separately fitted handrails and everything. Unnatural rush there into the incline so we can get up it. And then we'll take him back round to the station. I would you have to say he definitely does seem to run more evenly than the tender engines, than the Dapol tender engines. So there he is in the station, in Coldwell Station now. The third tank engine I have is a 1400. Actually, I want to take him the other way around. I think, well, you can take him either way around, but he's a 1400 with an auto coach. Now, this came as a set together with the 1400 and the auto coach. They're both Dapol, and they actually came boxed together as a set. Now, generally I only couple him up with this auto coach, but he can't even get this auto coach up that incline. That's why I've got him running on the outer track. I've got him running on the outer track, which is essentially flat, because he is not capable of getting his auto coach, even just his one coach that he came with. He's not capable of getting it up the incline. He gets stuck on the incline. He's the Great Western 1400 class, which were used very much with auto coaches. And as I say, he came in a pack with the auto coach, and it's a nice looking setup. But unfortunately, I pretty much have to run it. What is his wheel arrangement? I forget. 042, I think, isn't it? It's got two driving wheels and a pony truck behind. Again, he runs fairly smoothly on the flat. Not bad. I mean, it's not to my eye, it's not 100% smoothly. It still seems to me, I've got my hands off the controller now, and it still seems to me he's varying his speed a little bit. Even this guy. But he's running relatively smoothly. We turn him round and run him the other way. Stop him in scrapped off station. Turn him round and run him the other way, back to Colville. Yeah, I mean, he's not a bad little runner, but again, as I say, he's pretty much limited to running on the outer line, because, well, I could try putting Bullfog Snot, I guess, on one pair on. He's only got 2 running wheels, though, so then he's not going to have much contact, I don't know. So he's pretty much limited to running on the outer track, because he can't get that auto coach up the incline. So there you are, there's my Dapol engines. That's the tank engines, and before we saw the tender engines. So that's basically it.